Welcome to the Event Answer Studio. Today I want to show you how to create this lush blue balloon garland, and it all starts with an electric balloon inflator and 20 11-inch balloons in 4 different shades of blue. I'm going to inflate these 2 at a time, anywhere between 6 and 10 inches in diameter. Then I'm going to let a little bit of air out, press them down against the table so they're nice and round, and then tie them together into a pair by wrapping the nozzles around twice and tying them together in a simple knot. I'm going to repeat this step with all my 11-inch balloons except for 4, which all pair up with my 4 17-inch balloons and tie them into pairs as well. Now when I'm inflating both of these at the same time, you always want to make sure the larger balloon is on the trigger side of your inflator, so that way once the smaller balloon is full, you can keep inflating the large balloon until it reaches its max size. Once you're happy with the sizes of these 2 balloons, tie them together into pairs, and then we're going to take all of our latex balloons and tie them into clusters of 8 balloons. To make a cluster, take 2 pairs of the same color, overlap them so that the nozzles touch, and then twist 1 balloon from each of those pairs around each other, locking them into a quad. Create a second quad in the exact same way, and then slip the 2 of them together so that all the nozzles touch right in the center. Then take 2 balloons from 1 quad, wrap them all the way around, and twist those around each other, and that will lock all the nozzles of these balloons right in the center. I then repeated these steps until I had 3 clusters in each of my 4 colors. Now it should be noted that my pastel blue, the lightest blue color I'm using, does not come in a 17-inch size, so they're all made up of 11-inch balloons. In addition to the clusters, I'm going to inflate 2 17-inch balloons in my 3 shades of blue and tie them off individually. Then I can add them into the garland later on wherever I need to fill in any gaps or add some drama. So once I inflate those balloons and tie the nozzles off, I'm then going to take an empty 260 balloon and tie the end of that around the nozzle of each of my 17-inch balloons so I can easily tie these into the garland later on. To give our garland texture and visual interest, I'm going to inflate 16 of these 5-inch balloons in each of the 4 colors to 4 pumps of air, or 4.5 inches in diameter. And to save myself from tying lots of extra knots, I'm going to inflate 2 of these balloons at the same time and then tie them together into a pair just like we did our larger balloons. This is much faster than tying them individually and then tying them again into pairs. Then I twisted all my pairs into quads of the same color. So in total, I've got 4 quads in each of my colors ready to accent our balloon garland. The final accent we need to prepare are these silver Mylar orbs in both 10 inches and 22 inches. Now these orbs are a little different from your normal Mylar balloons. Usually when they're fully inflated, there's still a crinkle along all the seams, but that's not the case with these orbs. When you get to this point, you actually have to keep adding air until there's no longer any crinkles along any of the seams. Now this puts the orbs under a lot of tension and it feels like it's really full and tight, but you want to sneak up on that fullness level until all those seams are nice and smooth. I used my hand pump to inflate both the 10-inch and the 22-inch orbs, so I had a lot of control over exactly how much air was going in, and I can closely watch all the seams for the exact moment when they were smooth. Now that all the balloons are prepared, we can set up the backdrop that this garland will be built on. I'm using this adjustable backdrop stand as well as 2 5 by 10 foot long white panels to give me a nice clean backdrop, but you could always attach the garland directly to a wall using command hooks. Now once I've got both panels on and gathered in a nice fashion, I'm going to raise it to its final height of 7 feet tall and about 6 feet wide. Now it's time to assemble the balloon garland. I'm going to be tying my clusters together using some empty 260 balloons, but you could always use fishing line or curling ribbon as well. I'm going to tie the end of my 260 to my first cluster by pinching the end to the nozzles of that cluster, wrapping it figure 8 pattern, and then I'm going to grab my second cluster and nestle the 2 of them nice and close, stretch that 260 tight across the nozzles of the new cluster, and then wrap it in a figure 8 pattern around 2 balloons in that new cluster. That'll secure the 2 of them as one piece, and we can add our next cluster. As we add balloons, we want to pay special attention to the colors we're putting next to each other and making sure we're not repeating a specific pattern so our garland has an organic look to it. After you've tied a couple clusters together, you may get to the end of your 260 balloon and need a little bit more length, so you can just tie the end of a new 260 to what you've got remaining and continue on with the garland. In total, I tied 7 clusters together, as that was approximately the length I needed to stretch from opposite corners of my backdrop stand. To secure the garland to the backdrop, I'm going to tie an empty 260 balloon around the top right corner of my backdrop frame with a simple double knot. The long tail of this balloon is how we'll tie the garland to the frame. Now I want to hide the mechanics of this, so I'm going to take my backdrop fabric and just bring it over the top right corner so it hides all of my knots. Next, I'm going to raise my balloon garland and hold it approximately where I want it to sit in front of the backdrop, and then I'm going to stretch that 260 balloon tied to the frame and wrap it in a figure 8 pattern around 2 of the balloons in that first cluster. This will secure it to the backdrop, and then any remaining 260 tail you can just let go and it'll disappear into the garland. In the same way, I'm also going to secure the bottom of the garland to the bottom left corner of my frame so it doesn't shimmy around on the floor as I continue to add balloons. With the main body of the balloon garland in place, we can now fill it out so it's lush and wide. And to do that, I'm going to tie in all the remaining balloon clusters we have by simply taking a 260 balloon and tying it to the nozzles of each of my clusters, and then I'm going to set the cluster about where I think I want it on the garland. And then once I'm happy with the general placement, I'm going to stretch that 260 tight and wrap it around a couple of the balloons that are already in the garland. Working in a zigzag pattern, I'm going to alternate adding clusters on the top side and the underside of my garland, so I'm widening it out in an even manner. I don't want to add too many to one side and make it droop or get heavy, so this is my way of just making sure I keep everything nice and balanced. As we continue to add balloon clusters, the garland may begin to sag because it's only supported in that top right corner. So to add some extra support, I'm going to take several feet of fishing line and tie one end to a safety pin, which I'll just pin to the backdrop fabric. And then the other end of that fishing line, I'm going to wrap around a couple balloons in the center of my garland. I'm going to lift the garland up so it's no longer sagging, and then hold it in place while I take the end of that fishing line and wrap it in a figure 8 pattern around a couple of the balloons. Now once you've wrapped it once or twice, take a step back and look at the overall garland to see if it's sitting where you want, and if it is, wrap the fishing line a couple more times and then just tuck the tail into the garland. Next, I'm going to tie in the individual 17-inch balloons we prepared earlier. Hold the balloon where you want it in the garland, and then stretch that 260 tail around a couple of the balloons that are already attached to the garland to secure it in place. After all the large balloons are distributed across the garland, it's time to add our tiny balloon quads. An easy way to add these into the garland is by slipping a rubber band around one of the balloons in each quad, and then we can stretch that rubber band around any of the balloons that are in our garland next to where we want to place these tiny clusters. You just want to make sure that the rubber band goes all the way around the balloon and is sitting next to the nozzles and hidden from sight. These tiny quads are a great way to fill in any gaps you may have in the garland and to add some interest and texture. Now you may notice that I'm only putting balloons of the same color on top of each other, and that's because I'm going for a color blocked look, and this allows each color to really have their shining moment instead of being intermingled with each other. The one exception to this is adding in our silver Mylar orbs. I'm going to evenly distribute these across the entire garland, starting with my largest orbs first and securing them in place with a 260 that's tied to the nozzles of each of those balloons. Once I've got the large ones placed, I'm then going to disperse the tiny ones across the garland, and then I'll take a couple steps back and look at the overall design. I can tweak the placement of any of the balloons, and then as a final touch, I'm going to straighten up the backdrop fabric because it's probably gotten ruffled from all the balloons bumping against it. I like to fold the bottom of the panel towards the back of the display, and this allows the front to pool beautifully on the floor. I'm going to regather the fabric so it looks like the gathers at the top of the fabric panels. I also want to make sure there's no gapping between the two panels in the center of the display, and the poles on either side of the display are also covered by this fabric. It's the small details like this that really elevate your design and make it look professional. And now this stunning balloon garland is ready for a celebration. If you enjoyed today's project, you should check out this video next. And so until the next time I see you, remember, stay creative, everybody!